My name is Chelsea Nakayama. Today I will be introducing you to the topic of internet addiction. Internet addiction is the excessive or problematic use of the internet to the extent that the use leads to issues that affect relationships in a negative way. It is usually marked by a feeling of loss of control and helplessness. While research into the subject is relatively new, it will become more and more important as we become using technology even more. There are many underlying causes to internet addiction. The most cases are seen in adolescents and teenagers. Depression is a huge indicator of the likelihood of internet addiction. People who are depressed tend to use the internet as a way of escape. People with attention deficit hyperactivity disorder are also prone to issues with internet use. This is possibly because people can use the internet to cover their poor social skills and their personal difficulties and a lack of pleasure in their lives. Internet use functions as a reward for people with ADHD. Adolescents and teenagers are more likely to have issues because they have not yet developed the maturity needed to control the enthusiasm that comes with internet use. Family problems, school problems, and struggles with daily lives can lead adolescents to addiction. Broken homes, family conflict, as well as a lack of parental monitoring can lead to adolescents having issues with the internet. People who are more shy or introverted are more likely to have issues with internet addiction. The internet gives people who are introverted more control over the communication that they use. They have more time to think about how they want to respond and can do so without feeling judged. It is interesting to note that in studies, women are more likely to have addiction issues than men. The theory is that these men are somehow getting the social interactions they need somewhere else. There are many other underlying psychological issues that can lead to internet addiction. As mentioned earlier, depression is the leading cause, followed by loneliness. In both of these, people use the internet as a way to escape the lives they currently are living. This can also cover social skills that they haven't developed yet. Those with low self-control are also likely to become addicted. People with low self-control often seek immediate gratification and are very impulsive. They may use the internet as a way to stabilize their moods. These underlying issues are not unique to internet addiction. You would probably see these in any study of any addiction. The difference is we all use the internet in our daily lives, so it is more available for these people. I know that we all use the internet as a way to escape from time to time, and there's nothing wrong with that, as long as we keep it in its proper place. Once the usage becomes excessive or it starts to harm our lives, it is time to seek help. Next, Chris will go over the subjects of relationships and internet addiction. Thank you.
Thanks, Chelsea. As we move on in talking about internet addiction, it was really important to our team to look at the relational impacts of that internet addiction. Because when you are dealing with someone who has an addiction, it doesn't just impact you, but it impacts other people within those familial circles, and as we'll talk about a little bit later, even your work or school circles as well. So as we talk about internet addiction, it's important that we have a theoretical framework for how we're going to discuss the internet addiction when it comes specifically to familial ties or those relationships that we surround ourselves with. So, looking at this, we built a we're using a theoretical framework, specifically the theory of individual psychology. This theory looks at lifestyle, inferiority complexes, and social interests as important aspects of this research. We chose this because when you're looking at this internet addiction, it does impact lifestyles. It can have impacts on inferiority complexes and also social interests of these individuals who are dealing with internet addiction. So, looking at individuals who are addicted to the internet, what it does is it can create illusions of relationships with individuals that they have online. Whereas face to face relationships are important, these individuals are building their relational spheres of influence with online parties, not just people face to face. And what that does is it creates a non existent social support system. Now, social support system, as we know, is focused on having people that can support you and be there for you in times of need or in times of loneliness. And of course, that leads to feelings of loneliness when you have a non existent social support system. So it's important that individuals have these support systems and that they don't push people away, which is what happens in cases of internet addiction. They are actually pushing people away in real life, in those face-to-face relationships, which gets rid of that social support system in real life and creates feelings of loneliness. Now, when we're talking about having a lack of a support system, a social support system, what it does is, first and foremost, it creates a dependency on online internet communities. This dependency is created because when they push away people in real life and face-to-face instances, it's going to create a higher dependency on other relationships. And for someone who's addicted to the internet, it's going to be those online communities. And then what happens is when that person pushes away the face-to-face relationships, that social support, it's going to create feelings of loneliness, because if they don't have an internet connection, if they are at work or different places, even sitting at home with family members or friends or whatever it may be, if they have created their social support system based on online communities, it's going to create feelings of loneliness when they're not able to engage in those online communities. This can impact like we said a second ago, home life. It can impact work life, school, all types of different areas of your life, because those face-to-face relationships have been replaced with temporary or non-existent online relationships if you do not have that internet connection. Now, when we look at this loneliness, what happens is it actually creates feelings of withdrawal, low self-esteem, isolation tendencies, even aggression tendencies, because they're figuring out how to work through those isolation and those feelings of not having a social support system outside of those online communities. A really good example of this happening in everyday life is actually ISIS. ISIS is not necessarily something that is centered in one area with one people group. ISIS is a belief system, and that belief system was actually garnering a lot of support from online communities because people were finding a social support system that supported beliefs like they had like-minded individuals. But even in some cases, if they weren't like-minded, it still provided a community of people that would create a false sense of social support. And so people would engage in these online communities, and ISIS would bring them in, and then ISIS would have them do things that necessarily they may not have agreed with prior to becoming part of these social support systems. So it's really dangerous because when you are lonely and you feel like you don't have anyone in real life face to face, you seek out these communities online, and then these communities have much stronger power over having you do things or think a certain way, and you start to believe what that group believes. as we have talked about this, we've talked about the relational, and we're going to talk about other things in other portions of this project. But relationships are so heavily impacted by internet addiction. They're impacted because when we do not have face to face familial social support type structures, we'll seek them other places, and those are not always the healthiest places to find those. Um, the lack of face-to-face social activity is going to potentially increase the internet addiction because it's increasing the desire to be on the internet. Um, any individuals that find themselves addicted to something, anything, it could be internet or alcohol or anything, there are much deeper issues that need to be addressed, which we're going to talk about a little bit later when we discuss the treatments for this. So thank you so much. I'm going to pass it off to our next teammate, which is going to be Beth. Thanks.
Thank you very much for that informational material regarding internet addiction. The portion I'm going to work on our virtual project is how school and work life are impacted by internet addiction. Of course, technology is used in school and work life daily. It's part of assignments, whether it be for a grade in school or for performance in our job. The tipping point between usage and addiction often has to do with displayed behaviors. For example, addictive behavior includes compulsive use, difficulty managing time, lack of interest in other activities, agitation whenever access to the internet is limited, decreased social contact. When usage becomes addiction in school, the average age of exposure to the internet in 2012 was 8 years old. 92% of teens have daily internet access. 24% of teens report almost constant use of the internet. Participants self-reported that they began to identify a potential issue with the internet use between the ages of 10 and 32. When usage becomes addiction at work, the technology that many companies use to try to monitor their workers' productivity has been outwitted when someone brings a smartphone to work, as this is constant access to the internet that is not being monitored by the workplace. The requirements to stay connected has modified the behavior of adults who did not have technology as children. For example, many jobs require that their employees make contact after hours with emails. This constant checking of emails to stay on top of things engages someone in a pattern of behavior where they might begin to do this in other areas, such as the internet with games or a variety of other things. Awareness of overuse is often not recognized as addiction. Traits that impact internet addiction are much like the traits that impact other areas of addiction. For example, individuals with higher levels of achievement, affiliation, autonomy, and dominance are less likely to display addictive behaviors, such as withdrawal, compulsion, compulsive use, tolerance, interpersonal and health problems, and time management. The more engaged an individual was in other aspects of their life, the less likely the internet addiction occurs. Many use the internet as an escape. No one has a chance to be bored, as entertainment is always available via the internet. Factors that attributed to non-school or non-work access of the internet are emotional, interpersonal, and situational. The internet was used to express strong moods, manage anxiety resulting from conflict, and alleviating boredom. While having something to do constantly in the palm of one's hand makes it easier to stave off boredom, it also causes them to neglect other aspects of their life. The cost of internet addiction, for example, includes compulsive use, withdrawal, decreased tolerance, problems with time management, and interpersonal and health issues. These issues contribute to one's quality of life. In the face of work and home, not being engaged can certainly have repercussions with relationships, either with a partner or with one's organization. Thank you.
In this segment of the presentation, we will be talking about treatments for internet addiction. Internet addiction is defined as a lack of control which can include addiction to both online games, social media, and other aspects of internet use. Internet addiction can also give rise to a host of social and psychological problems and leave numerous negative impacts. A variety of treatments exist for internet addiction, but they are in their infancy stages and studies are still in progress. However, these studies tend to ignore the effects of positive psychological intervention. We will talk about two internet addiction treatments, one from a psychological approach called positive psychological intervention, and the other from a physiological approach, which is bupropion sustained release treatment. This psychological intervention is based on positive psychology methods. These psychological methods study positive emotions and personal traits aimed at improving overall health. It also emphasizes positive emotions and improvement of the overall quality of life. The aim of this study by Kahaze and others was to evaluate the effectiveness of a group-based psychological intervention in the treatment for internet addiction. 48 internet addicted college students were randomly assigned to either an experimental or a control group, with 24 members per group. The study measured the effects that severe internet use has on relationships. Kahaze and others found that the severity of internet use and the internet addiction rate in the experiment group was lower than those of the control group. Social adjustment and quality of relationships in the experiment group revealed an increase compared to the control group. Therefore, Kahaze and others conclude that psychological intervention is an effective method for treating internet addiction, especially as it relates to internet use and improving the quality of social relationships. Kahaze and others also propose that positive psychological intervention increases social adjustment, improves the quality of relationships, and reduces the severity of internet use for individuals with internet addiction. Now let's look at a physiological intervention. One approach physiologically to internet addiction involves the use of the drug bupropion. According to Medline Plus, bupropion is an antidepressant which is also used to help people stop smoking. It works by increasing certain types of activity in the brain. Durkin and others suggest that symptoms of individuals with internet video game addiction are like those with substance dependence or pathological gambling. Hahn and others postulated that 6 weeks of bupropion sustained release treatment might decrease the cravings of internet addiction. 11 subjects who were addicted to internet gaming were chosen. These subjects reported gaming more than 30 hours a week and had a persistent desire for gaming. These subjects were compared to 8 healthy subjects who only played video games 3 days a week, 1 hour per day. An MRI was used to measure baseline brain activity of all 19 subjects, and another MRI was used at the end of the 6 weeks of bupropion sustained release treatments. After the 6-week period of bupropion sustained release treatment, Durkin and others discovered that cravings for Internet video gameplay, total gameplay time, and cue-induced brain activity had decreased among the subjects with Internet video game addictions. Conclusions. As evidenced in the studies referenced, Internet addiction is a problem that can be compared to addictions to substances such as cigarettes, illegal drugs, and gambling. These studies also indicate that successful treatments for Internet addiction are available. Psychological intervention methods that study positive emotions and personal traits that are aimed at improving overall health have proven to be successful. Also, success has been obtained from treating Internet addiction with the drug bupropion, which helps to reduce the cravings of those dealing with Internet addiction. Thank you for watching the presentation.